Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at a red wine from the Rioja region of northern Spain. So this is the 2016 vintage of Vina Real's Reserva Rioja. Viña Real, a company that was established in 1920 to produce a single vineyard wine from the town of Elciego. The winery was established by CVNE, or the Compañia Vinicola del Norte, España, more popularly known these days as CVNE. However, Viña Real is run independently, it has its own identity, and it has its own winery. The name Viña Real comes from the fact that evidently a large number of its vineyards were initially next to the Camino Real, the Royal Road, the King's Road. The current winery was built in 2004 and it's in Laguardia. Quite a distinctive set of buildings, with one particular portion of it, a large circular hall that is clad in red cedar and has been constructed to look from the outside like a huge fermenting vat. Today, the fruit for all Vina Real's wines comes from around the towns of Elciego and Laguardia, and in one or two of the sort of surrounding municipalities, all of them within the Alavesa sub-region of Rioja. So these are slightly more structured style of wines that should have the ability to age for a long period. The vineyards this fruit comes off a small, often terraced, dry-farmed bush vine with an average vine age of about 30 years. The soils here are chalky clay containing very little organic matter, so naturally restricting yields. The blend for the 2016, I'm informed by Viña Real's website that 90% of that is Tempranillo. The remaining 10% may be, as their website says, Garnacha, Mauzuelo and Graciano, or the back label simply notes the Garnacha and the Mauzuelo without mentioning the Graciano. So anyway, the majority of the wine is Tempranillo with small amounts of Garnacha, Mauzuelo and possibly a little Graciano. The fruit is hand-picked and is put by gravity into stainless steel tanks for a pre-fermentation cold soak. Presumably quite prior to that it's crushed, lightly at least. However, the notes don't actually specify this. I'm assuming the wine is not undergoing a partial carbonic maceration, so you'd need to crush the fruit really. Fermentation is allowed to start, but it is controlled so that it doesn't get too hot to about 28 to 30 degrees C. To ensure good extraction, throughout the fermentation process, there are pump overs of juice from the bottom of the tank back up over the cap at the top, or also they'll use a process called rack and return, where they actually drain the whole tank out from under the cap of skins and then return it on top of the skins, so that you're keeping the skins wet so that they don't dry out and become volatile, and also it's helping you extract tannins and colour and aromas from the grape skin. After fermentation, the wines run into concrete tanks. From there, it goes on into a mixture of French and American oak, where it ages for 22 months. Again, this information diverges from the back label, where it says it ages for a minimum of 12 months, but I guess 22 months is over 12 months, so I suspect the 22 months is correct there. The wine was bottled in May of 2019 and then spent another 18 months at least aging in the company's cellars prior to release. 2016 was a warm, dry vintage. As a result, the fruit was generally healthy. There was very little rot in it. Picking went on slightly later than usual, between the 5th and the 25th of October. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we, and see what we make of that. My initial impressions are of the colour, which is deep and dark, almost opaque. It's a dark red to ruby red sort of colour. As I swirl it, it is forming fairly noticeable tears on the side of the glass. The wine has 13.5% alcohol, so that's a combination of that alcohol and probably the phenolics within the wine adding some body there. Let's see what we make of the aromas, shall we? The aromas are savoury and cedary. The developed notes of forest floor, overlaying notes of perhaps red currant, red cherry, red plum, in sort of opening up in that order. Initially the sort of the burst of fresher red currant, then becoming more rich red cherry, and then the sort of the deeper, riper, quite dark red plum, I suppose. There are cedary notes there, And there are plenty of notes of sort of developed forest floor, as I say. Let's taste. Tasting that currently, the wine has fairly drying tannins, they're fine. There's a slight touch of spice from the oak, but actually there's much more of that sort of developed dried leaves sort of note. And then from behind that, the sort of red plummy fruit is coming forward quite nicely. It hasn't quite got the juiciness or the richness of a sort of a dark red cherry. It's much more plummy. Maybe there's a touch of sort of charcoaly note from the oak. It's a little bit of sort of licoricey concentration, but actually there's much more sort of open red fruit. The wine isn't particularly heavy. It's probably medium to full-bodied, but the structure is not particularly harsh. There's some grip, but it's not particularly astringent. The alcohol is clearly in balance. There's a little bit of roundness and richness, and that's a sort of perhaps a slightly darker plum note on the back palate, but in general it's that red fruit that's finishing. Maybe it's drying out a little as a result of the tannins. I mean, I certainly think that this is a wine that would benefit from another couple of years in bottle, just to sort of soften that little bit more. But it has complexity, it has reasonable structure. The acidity is nicely in balance. It's keeping, there's just enough acidity. I'm just sort of seeing a tiny touch of me salivating in reaction to it, but not enormously. There's just enough acidity just to sort of enliven that red fruit and give it that sort of slightly lifted plummy note, and stop it from being too drying and stopping those forest floor notes from overtaking. So yes, I think this is quite a typical Reserva Rioja. For the price, I think this is actually offering some quite good value. I mean, 2016, so it's a 7-year-old wine that is, you know, perhaps yet to reach its full maturity. And I think showing that, you know, for instance, if you love Bordeaux wines or something like that, reasonable quality Riojas can offer a very good alternative price-wise. There's structured wines that will age and gain complexity in the cellar if you have the patience for it. So thank you very much for joining us. I hope you found the tasting interesting. If you have enjoyed it, do please press the like button. Do share it with your friends. It would be great if you'd sign up and follow us on YouTube. But most importantly, I hope you'll be able to find the time to join us again for another tasting really soon. Goodbye now.